Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to this Facebook Live session focusing, putting a lens on education for the election. So I want to straight up welcome our guests. We've got three guests here today. We've got Nicola Wallis. There she is, Tracy Martin. And are you there, Tracy? Say hi.
Kia ora.
And Naomi Pocock.
Kia ora.
Naomi, there you go. Sweet, excellent. So you all know why we're here. You've received the questions beforehand. We thought we'd just start with giving you, we know people are going to use this at staff meetings and stuff, so we want to be quite punchy. So we thought we'd just give you 2 minutes at the start to say, in general, what your party's policies are around education, what your focus is, and then you've got a list of pre-prepared questions. Some people may be asking questions duringwards if people join on live, so we'll put those questions to you at the end. Okay, who wants to go first? You're up on the screen, actually, Tracy. Maybe we should just start with you.
Okay. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, ko Martin te whānau, ko Mohi te whānau whāngai, ko Ngāti Kahununu te iwi, ko Tracy tako ingoa. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I've just walked off a plane, walked into the office and managed to get onto this call. The overarching driver behind New Zealand First Education Policy, which I write from the cradle to the grave, is that every New Zealander, if we concentrate on the compulsory sector and ECE, every child needs to have what they need as quickly as possible, as close to the ground as possible, to meet their own success. And success looks different for every single child. So that's the policy I write. That's the driver behind it. What does that child need to be their best?
Brilliant. I love that. Thank you, Tracy. That's nice and succinct, and wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. Okay, should we just go to you now, Nicola? I think you're on mute, Nicola.
Hi, could be better educated in how to use Zoom. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Nicola Wallis toko ingoa, no te whanganui a tara aho, and I am National's education spokesperson. I'm also a mother of 4 children, 10 and under, so I've got a lot of recent experience with the education system. And I want, and National wants for our education system what I think all parents expect, which is that every child, no matter their circumstances or background, should get from school the skills, knowledge, and sense of self-belief and qualifications they need to contribute to our community and succeed in life. And unfortunately, while most of our schools and most of our teachers do an incredible job, we still have too many young people leaving school without those skills or qualifications that they need and that they are capable of having. So National's education policy is wide-ranging. It's some simple practical things like smaller class sizes in our primary schools, like ensuring there's additional resources for children with learning disabilities or extra physical needs, like putting extra funding into rebuilding our schools and fixing them up, because no one should have to learn or teach in a rotting classroom. And our focus is absolutely on achievement. We recognise that teachers are at the heart of things. We will only get great results if we have great teachers, and so teachers do need to be well supported. We also believe that there is a place for choice, because not every child is the same, and what works really well for one child at school may not work well for another. So our policy includes partnership schools, supporting kura kaupapa, supporting integrated schools, supporting designated character schools, because we think having a bit of innovation and something different in the education system can work for those learners who may not succeed in the mainstream system. So I look forward to talking with you about our education policy today. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Nicola. Thank you for that. Good to hear that emphasis on individual needs. We've heard from both candidates so far. Naomi, let's hear from you.
Thank you. Kia ora, ko Aotearoa toko wakainga, ko te Opportunities Party toko manawa ora, ko Naomi aho. So I'm Naomi Pocock, standing in Hamilton East, also education spokesperson for the Opportunities Party. And what I just said was that New Zealand is my home and the people and the place that I feel responsible for. And the Opportunities Party is my hope and my strength. And I'm going to explain a little bit why, because I think a lot of people perhaps top is new to a lot of people who are listening today. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I see teachers as representative of, you know, the thinking New Zealanders. And so in this election, we're going to be spending a lot of money in the next little while, our children's and our grandchildren's money. And so I'm looking to encourage people to think about this election not as a two-horse race, but in terms of voting for the future for those children. And so who do we want to be holding both National and Labour to account going forward, for the next 30 years? So why is TOP my hope? Because we create policy based on the research and the science and the evidence and what the experts are saying we need to be doing, looking around the world at what's working well, applying it to the New Zealand context to provide a vision for New Zealand going forwards. Really in-depth quality policy, and the early childhood policy, for example, is a really detailed policy and the only one of its kind. So we don't tinker at the edges based on a 3-year election cycle, and we don't create policy to buy your votes and then say, oh, sorry, that was too hard for us to implement. We tell it how it is and what needs to be done to take us to the future that we want. And a good example is the early childhood education pay parity situation, which our policy talks about some of the complicating factors in that, and talks about how we want to make sure that if there is funding allocated, it needs to land in the pockets of the teachers. And we saw during COVID an example of where that didn't happen.
Okay.
So
we're running out of time, Naomi. So
okay, really quickly, in terms of education more broadly, we want to create a system of teaching and learning over compliance and testing. And but yes, the focus for us is early childhood, because we see a crisis happening in parts of that sector, which we'll talk about as we go through the questions.
Okay, kia ora, Naomi. I wanted to start us off with more of a philosophical question now, rather than going straight into policy. So I was talking with my EA about, for a start, we were going to go, should we rank these in order? The child needs to be a global citizen, B, happy, and give you a multi-choice list. But I thought, no, that might be too difficult. So we've just gone with you finishing the sentence. If we say the single most important thing that our education system needs to achieve for our tamariki is, and should we just stick with the order that we randomly went in and go with Tracy?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Tracy.
Is they know what they're good at, they're proud of themselves, and they know that they can achieve their success.
Okay, so I'm hearing self-esteem and confidence in there.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Love that. Nicola?
That they have the skills and knowledge they need to pursue their aspirations and those of their whānau and community.
Kia ora. Okay, and Naomi?
That they have a strong sense of community and belongingness and feeling settled in who they are within themselves in terms of their relationships and the broader environment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful to hear all three of you to focus on that basically what I'd say the social emotional well-being of the child is forming a foundation for achieving all of those things. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so a topic, because I know all of you, so you all know that a topic that's really close to my heart is the first 1,000 days. So you won't be surprised by the next question. The first 1,000 days are crucial in terms of child development. Please describe your party's early childhood policy relating specifically to the first 1,000 days. That's from conception until, 2.5.
Okay. So for New Zealand First, I actually want to give parents the opportunity to be parents. I want to give parents the opportunity to be supported financially, to be at home during the first 1,000 days. So that's part of our Child and Families package, which really is a revamp of the Universal Family Benefit that could be used by parents to pay for ECE if they wish to, or it could be used to support them to stay at home and actually be a stay-at-home parent.
Great. Kia ora, Tracy. Nicola, first 1,000 days?
Well, I'm really proud of National's work in this area over the past 3 years. As our caucus, we've really recognised all that evidence and research telling us that if you get it right in those first 1,000 days, it makes a difference for a life course, not only for the individual, but actually for the taxpayer too, in terms of that person's ability to contribute. So our first 1,000 days policy recognises that parents are absolutely crucial and the family unit is crucial. And actually the mum is crucial. So we propose a 3-day stay for every mother when she gives birth. She doesn't have to take it, but she gets that entitlement. We then recognise that, yes, while there are some universal entitlements in terms of tamariki ora, blanket, etc., that it's not often enough. And so we've proposed an additional layer of support, $3,000 for every family to purchase the support services they might need in those first months of life. We think that that'll be used for things like lactation support, or having someone come visit the home and show you how to get your baby to sleep when you're at your wit's end, or perhaps pay for some space visits or some parenting courses. So we want every family to feel that those first 1,000 days are really special, and the community and the country are behind them and want them to do well. We also propose additional screening in those tamariki ora visits. We want to bring forward the before school check to 3 years old, because right now too many people are missing out on it. And actually, if things are identified, often it's too late to act on them before the child then starts school. So we want to involve early childhood teachers in that screening process, have them contribute, because they have so much knowledge about a child and how they're doing, and ensure that where we find that there are issues, we intervene earlier. We're also proposing that a priority for us, an absolute priority for us, is to reduce ratios for under twos in our early childhood centres. At the moment, it's 1 teacher to 5 young babies, and we think that makes it really difficult to establish proper dyadic relationships. And we know that those relationships are at the heart of quality in early childhood education. So we'll be prioritising lowering those ratios. As you can see, I'm passionate about this, Nathan. I could go on, but it's not the Nicola Willis show, so I'll shut up and there'll be questions later.
I mean, I'm passionate about what you're talking about as well. And I think straight away with that before school checks at 3, just want to say I think a crucial part of that success is going to be not just getting early childhood teachers to contribute, but to get early childhood teachers to drive that. Because what traditionally happens is we get a primary school curriculum imposed top down to early childhood, and the focus is on getting them ready for school. But I'm not here to get on my soapbox, so I'll just carry on and go to Naomi.
Oh, thank you very much. And, you know, it's awesome to see National coming on with these this importance of the first 1,000 days. That's really good work, Nicola. Thank you very much. I guess for us, it's about, you know, a fundamental overhaul of the tax and welfare system. So we are proposing a universal basic income for everybody. Think of it as superannuation for all, $250 a week per parent, per adult, to $40 a week per child. It is a fully costed policy, so that means it's tax neutral, meaning we're taking it from elsewhere and applying it to, you know, other places. So it's not going to cost the government any money, but they also don't get anything from it. So really, this is a good example of the fundamentals, and it provides that basic level of security and dignity to our families, which is what our parents and our children need. But it also provides opportunity for youth and, you know, people who want to get off the benefit and work, and it just is a really good solution for everybody. So that's us at a fundamental. So yes, we absolutely value the first 1,000 days and the next 1,000 days and the next 1,000 days, because actually, you know, we need to look at children holistically and throughout their whole lives, and providing them with the opportunities to create those one-to-one, warm, reciprocal, consistent relationships is so important. And our early childhood policy also talks a lot about integration between the communities, the families, and the early childhood service. That really needs fixing.
Okay, kia ora, Naomi. You've sort of, a lot of you have answered a lot of this next question within your question, so don't have to repeat yourself, just to give you a chance to pick up on anything additional you wanted to say. So we've had a participation policy that we've been running that seems to aim to get 100% of children into early childhood centres, like that's a really good thing. Whereas my concern is that, and we've already come up on topic, is that actually the research shows a lot of children are better off at home in that first 1,000 days, not in an early childhood centre. So how is your policy aligning with this research? I think, Tracy, you've already sort of spoken to that and what you said before.
Yeah, but I go further, and it's a conversation I've had with NZEI. Early childhood education used to be 3.5 and 4 years onward. What's happened is, over the last decade or so, we've pushed it down to babies. Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is that if I was to say that we want to separate that back out so that we've got an ECE level here, which is from 3.5 to 4, and then we're actually talking about childcare below that, suddenly everybody gets incredibly offended, because now supposedly childcare is somehow less. And yet, if we look at play centre, if we look at what Te Whariki really was about, it was about parents and children being able to grow together in those very early years, which is why I'm so passionate about play centre and kohanga reo. So, so from my perspective, I'd actually like to see us value childcare again and start to bring our parents back in rather than this driver that you're only going to get paid or supported by your state if you put your children into a professional daycare.
Right. Okay. Kia ora, Tracy. Thank you. Nicola.
Look, my aspiration is that every family have genuine choices about their work in childcare and early childhood education choices and arrangements in the early years. I think it's really important we recognise that families have different needs and different drivers, and some families will choose early childhood education for their child, not just for financial reasons, but actually because that's what gives mum a better sense of her ability to parent well, or that's what gives dad a better sense of his ability to do that. So I think we have to recognise that people bring different things to these decisions and be very non-judgmental about that from a government policy perspective. What we can do from a government policy perspective is ensure that when people choose government licensed early childhood education, we ensure it's of good quality. Okay. And one of the things I've observed travelling around the country visiting different early childhood services is we have huge richness and variety, as Tracy says, play centre, kohanga reo, privately owned centres, community owned centres, different philosophies. And parents do choose what suits them. Mm-hmm. But every centre I go to says, but there's the centre around the corner or down the road or in another neighbourhood who's not doing a good job. We're really worried. And so what I think is very important is that we enforce the regulations we have. And my sense is that is not always happening. And so we've proposed in our early childhood education policy spot checks to randomly check on ECE services to see whether they are actually meeting the regulations. Because actually our regulatory framework's pretty good, but my concern is that not everyone is always meeting it.
Okay, kia ora, Nicola. Thank you for that. Good on you guys for all keeping in time. I thought I was going to be reining everybody in, but everyone's doing a really succinct job. Thank you. Naomi?
I think I agree. I mean, the good quality early childhood education services have been sort of taken over by the corporatisation of the market on the ground, and that has led to, some detrimental consequences for our children, who are, by the way, our most vulnerable citizens in our society. So what we need to do is acknowledge that and go, actually, that's not good. This dividend motive where the purpose of owning an early childhood centre is to pay money out to shareholders, coupled with some policy decisions that have been made based on zero evidence. Those are the things that we are challenging. And so yes, we need to better support our parents in terms of the universal basic income, also just the affordability. It's all very well to say parents need to stay at home, but they can't afford to because their cost of housing, both in terms of rent and house prices, are so high. And so again, we've got, fundamental policy at top to hold house prices steady for a generation, so it becomes all affordable for us to make our choices in our lives. So the changes need to happen at that fundamental level. We've got some other ideas, quality-based contracting model and advocating 2 to 8 in home-based care, that sort of stuff. By listening to the experts, the solutions are there. We just need to get in there and do it.
Okay, brilliant. Kia ora, Naomi. Some of the questions are overlapping here because we're going to talk next about that sort of topic, really, that we saw previously that we dropped our qualifications for early childhood teachers to only needing to be 80%. We live immersed in a culture that thinks a primary school teacher is more important than an early childhood teacher and a secondary school teacher is more important than a primary school teacher. And yet we know that 20, 30 years of evidence tells us actually the early childhood teacher is the most important. It's not even like they're equal. The early childhood teacher is the most important. So I know governments have to respond to the culture that they're immersed in, but yeah, how is your party or going to improve that, change that, improve the quality of ECE and the mana that it's held with in the community?
So I think what we come back to is where New Zealand First and actually Labour started from. So, one of the reasons that New Zealand First selected Labour to form the coalition government was because we knew we needed to change TAC, and this is one of those areas. So there was that commitment from New Zealand First and from Labour to bring back, to incrementally return to 100% qualified ECE teachers. But also, you're absolutely right, Nathan. I want to talk about pay parity. There's some strange thing out there about New Zealand First being a block to pay parity. Interestingly enough, it was New Zealand First back in the 2000s that got pay parity between primary school teachers and secondary school teachers. And my personal view is that the foundation is set by ECE and primary teachers, and then the success of secondary, it bounces off that foundation. So the biggest challenge we have around acknowledging the skills of our ECE teachers and in pay parity is the privatisation that has been done to the sector. And how do we make sure through the privatisation of the sector that any money that the state puts in does go directly to the teachers? And that's the funding model that Chris and I are working on, because we're going to have to fundamentally change the funding model to make sure that money gets to where it needs to be, which is the front line, the teachers.
Brilliant. Kia ora, Tracy. Over to you, Nicola.
Well, National absolutely values early childhood teachers and sees the enormous role they do. And I've spent a lot of time in public meetings and discussion groups over the past 2.5 years explaining to people that yes, the men and women in our early childhood services have the same qualifications and have to meet the same registration requirements as those in primary schools. And you're right, Nathan, that's not a well-known fact in our wider community, and it's something I think as leaders we need to keep repeating. So of course pay is an issue. National has committed to continuously lifting the minimum attestation rates for pay for government licensed services, recognising, of course, that a proportion of early childhood services are privately owned, so there are some limits on the government's ability to impose pay structures, but we can impose minimum rates and we can continue to lift those. But I do want to say that treating teachers like professionals is about pay. It's also about things like access to professional development. And that's something we've recognised in our early childhood policy is absolutely vital. Because again, I see a very varied picture across the country of the access that teachers have. And it's also about recognising the knowledge and expertise ECE teachers have in terms of those tamariki ora checks, in terms of child development, contributing to what have historically been health-led conversations, but that I think teachers should be far more involved in. I also just want to put a word out for the 10,000 educators working in our ECE services right now who aren't registered teachers. But I do think in many situations do an incredible job. You know, they are often registered nurses, or they've had a background in social work, or they speak Te Reo beautifully, or they have a Pacifica language, and they don't have a teaching certificate yet. Often they're on the pathway to that, or that's something they aspire to.
That's key, isn't it?
But they make a big contribution. And what we know from the research, and Nathan, you know it better than me, so I'm sorry if I butcher it, but what's really important is the relationship between the child and the educator. And I think we really have to keep that emphasis. I want to see more qualified teachers in our ECE services, and I'd like to support more people who don't have qualifications into them. But I'm not sure that 100% is the highest priority right now.
Okay, kia ora. Thank you for that, Nicola. Naomi, your party's all based on research and evidence-based. I mean, that's sort of the flag that it waves. So yep. I'm sure you're keen to talk to this topic.
Always keen to talk, Nathan. Yes, so, I mean, in our view, a teacher is a teacher is a teacher, so they should be being paid the same if they've got the same sort of qualification and experience. Obviously, we are prioritising early years because, you know, as we've talked about, that's where the investment is needed. I guess I would just point out that we differentiate between the terminology teacher and educator. So for me, or for, you know, looking at the research, a teacher is a qualified person with a qualification, but we are all educators of children. They are little sponges and they are learning from all of us. And whether you're the parent or the auntie or the grandmother or the, you know, the shopkeeper or whatever, they come into contact with you, they are learning from us all, including their siblings and everything. So we are all educators of our children. In terms of the, you know, so we're committing to dismantling ERO and putting the money saved in bureaucracy into quality professional development for teachers across the whole spectrum. And in terms of the 100% qualified thing, we are saying that, you know, in a centre, so obviously we've got play centre, we've talked about that, the parents are the educators of the children, that is very important. And I've got some concerns around the requirements for training, Tracy, in play centre. This could be something.
Play centre put it on there. Play centre did that themselves.
I know they did, and I've been emailing them, but perhaps we could work together on this because it is literally killing our play centres.
You are absolutely right. Absolutely right.
We agree. Awesome. But in terms of the 100% qualified thing, yeah, we're going for 80% qualified and the other 20% for, sorry, I've just got a neurological condition. Can you just hang on a minute?
Yep, you go for it, Naomi. We can take over from here and come back to you, right? Okay, right. So eradicating child poverty has been a huge focus. Well, it's always been a huge focus, but apparently more so lately. And that's going to require government departments to work really close together rather than working in silos. I mean, we have things like the Children's Commissioner that I see working, across government departments, but how is your party specifically going to achieve that, to get government departments working together to get a unified focus on child wellbeing?
So I'm the co-minister with the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern on the Child and Youth Wellbeing Strategy. The purpose of that strategy, so it's got the 3,000 voices of young people inside it. The purpose of the strategy was to set a line in the sand that said, this is what wellbeing looks like for our young people. And we will not allow our young people to fall below that line. Now, let's get real. Young people don't live alone. So that they're inside whānau, they're inside family. Yep. So the next steps were, and that's what all government departments are doing now, they have to answer the question, how are your actions affecting the wellbeing of children? So they've had to go away, and they're now coming back with what are their actions and how are they interacting together to actually lift those young people and those families who are below that line up to the line. And the announcement I made with the whānau order, the 42 million over 2 years with whānau order, that was an agreement between, or a collaboration between Oranga Tamariki, ACC and TPK, is the first true joint venture of funding from any government through to directly to the front line and to our families.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Kia ora. Nicola.
Nathan, this is something that every incoming government talks about. They say, we're not going to have these silos, we're not going to have the government departments all off working separately, we're going to force them to work together on these joint government goals. And of course, that's how it should be. It's proven very difficult in practice. One of the levers that national, it has, isn't it, Tracy?
I've done it though. I've done it. So, it's been done.
Right. Probably not 100% there yet, though, even you'd agree. Or maybe not. Anyway, one of the levers we had success with in government was that we said, let's set a set of 10 targets that everyone in every government department has to measure their progress against. One of them was immunisation rates. And I think that child wellbeing measures should be treated like that. And the way you make that work is you actually put some money behind it. So you say, well, if you're coming to bid for cash in the budget, unless it's doing something to move the dial on those targets, then, we're not really interested. So that's one thing. The second thing that I just want to fly the flag for is in the final term of the national-led administration, Bill English really pushed forward what he called a social investment approach. And what that was identifying what are the initiatives that government has taken that are making the biggest difference, that the investments, particularly earlier on in life, or the programs or initiatives that we run, that we can see are most successful. Because if we identify that, let's do more of that, let's multiply that. And I think that approach is one that any government should take. And I'm sure it segues nicely into TOP, who are all about evidence and data as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Kia ora for that segue. Over to you, Naomi.
Thank you, and sorry for my little interruption. So yes, the main driver of poverty in this nation is our cost of housing in terms of house prices and rent prices. We're in a recession, but house prices have gone up 16% in the last year, and every time house prices go up, so do rent prices, and more people fall off the cliff. And no one else is talking about the demand side. We can't build our way out of this crisis. There is a demand issue in terms of the fact that we all chuck all our money into housing, unproductive assets, things that don't create jobs and exports or build a strong economy. And so TOP is talking about that fundamental change that's needed in terms of creating a stronger economy so that we can all be better off. So that's the, the main driver of poverty. And then in terms of, yes, absolutely, getting government departments to work together, of course they should. We need to get out of our silos, not just in government, but in terms of, everything that we look at needs to be looked at from a post-disciplinary perspective.
Okay, kia ora, Naomi. Thank you for that. another topic close to my heart, because when we look at, international PISA scores and all these different measures for how well children do, and we see Scandinavian countries often coming up, in that top cluster all the time. And I think one of the things they do really well is play-based and inquiry learning. They recognise the importance of play. Again, I think we've developed a wee bit of a culture in New Zealand where we think play is something you do quickly before you hurry up and get to learning. And that's, I think, curbing our children's creativity and basically their potential. So what's your party's views on play-based learning, or later on it tends to be called inquiry-based learning?
Oh, yeah.
Tracy?
So Te Whariki, in my mind, before national standards, Te Whariki was supposed to go up the schooling of children. So, it's a curriculum that's based around what is look, I don't have to, I'm sure the people watching know what Te Whariki is. So It was supposed to go up. It got stopped and stunted by national standards. And national standards took us back to what was, this is a line in the sand. How do we test for it? Blah, blah, blah. In my perfect world, what I would love us to be able to do is shift to the Scandinavian model, the Finnish model, where there's only one test out the other side when young people leave school. But all the way through, they have proven themselves. They have worked on projects. They have had relationships and worked in teams, and they have gained credits, but not through sitting a test or sitting an exam. They've shown through their actions and through their work that I can do this. And that goes to that original vision, which is, I know I'm good at this. There are things that we need to do. This is not taking away from numeracy and literacy, but this is actually saying numeracy and literacy falls out of everything. And so how do we capture what is the capacity for numeracy and literacy, resource and support it so that they can be their best, but take away what is this need from New Zealanders to have a test that must be passed. We're still stuck in the 1970s.
Yeah, it's going to open up the obvious question, though, Tracy, of what about the kids that must possibly fall through the cracks that aren't noticed if we don't have assessment?
But that's when you say assessment, they are being assessed. They're not being tested. So because you've got a relationship with the teacher, because you've got a relationship with the student, this is actually what Māori have been talking about. This is what Pacifica's been talking about. This is why the wānanga are successful, because relationships are everything. And when you know that young person, you spend time with that young person, you actually help them grow. People don't slip through the cracks then because they've actually got a relationship.
Kia ora. Love that. Love that. Nicola, over to you.
Well, look, I'm one of these people that's been challenged continuously as to whether or not play-based learning is a good idea. And so I've inquired pretty rigorously with teachers about what it actually is. Because I think, as you know, and probably a lot of people listening know, play-based learning isn't just playing. And I think the problem is that sometimes that's how it's perceived. It doesn't mean just let a child go in a classroom and just fiddle with whatever they want to fiddle. It still means teacher-led learning. It's just that they're able to learn through play, and the teacher should observe their play, understand what the next steps in their play could be, understand where on their development progression they are, and see through their play what they're ready for next.
And just like a teacher, that's dead, spot on.
Yeah, so I think me getting that understanding has helped me, but I do caution that a lot of people in our community don't kind of have that understood, and where they hear play-based learning, they hear free for all, no teacher, just do whatever. And so I think we've got a job to do to communicate what good play-based learning is. Yeah. And to the discussion you were having with Tracy, we do have this issue that regardless of the good intent of many, we do have kids who fall through the cracks. It's just the reality. We have kids leaving school without the qualifications they need. We have kids leaving school without literacy and numeracy. So I do think there need to be accountability mechanisms. And I do think that good schools and good teachers are pretty comfortable about sharing objective assessment information with parents about how their child is doing. And they all use different systems. Some use Ready Reckoners, some use Astle, some use different systems. But I think that does give parents a window into how their children are doing, and it allows them to be involved in helping.
Nobody's saying, and let's get clear, there's a difference between assessment and testing.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So let's just be really clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we see that in countries like that you've pointed out that don't have the tests at the end. We do still see that assessment happening all the way through. Okay, I loved what you said there, Nicola. Just before we're going to Naomi about, I'm often saying to audiences, yeah, free play is not free range. We grew up with free range. Be home by the time the street lights are on. That's not what we're advocating. It's everything you said about the trained teachers. So kia ora motu kōrero. Naomi, over to you.
Thank you. And I'm really heartened to hear that we're all speaking from the same song sheet. That is amazing and awesome. And I just, I do question, why has it not been done then? Why are we still testing our high school kids, teaching to the test? Why haven't we,
Tell you why.
Well, okay. But, I guess where I'm coming from is just let's get this stuff done. Let's cut out the need for NCEA level 1, 2, and 3, and let kids finish school with 1, 2, or 3, and enable the years before to be about, finding their talents and a broad curriculum. I guess what the Opportunities Party is advocating is, professional quality professional development and collaboration between schools, getting away from this competitive model, and just enabling teachers to do their jobs and have the conversations with society and the parents and be the educational experts, and let's trust them to do their jobs. That's where we want to get to.
Nathan, can I just jump in there? Just a couple of things. First of all, ERO is about continuous improvement. So it's not about testing the teachers, it's about continuous improvement. So I'm a little bit concerned that Top is talking about doing away with ERO. But you're right about the administration levels. There does need to be changes there. You asked why we haven't done away with NCEA level 1, 2, and 3. Because we actually did. Chris and I had this conversation as part of Tomorrow's Schools with the employers and with parents. And right now it was employers that said that NCEA level 1 needs to be there, because they wanted something recognisable for those 15.5 to 16-year-old students when they came out. I sit on the tripartite of work and the future of work, and it was the IT industry that said what we've recognised is it's the ability of that young person to think, not the qualification that they come out with, that has become more beneficial to our company. So now we don't look at their qualification, we look at the way that they think. So Naomi, it's a matter of training the business world that this is okay, and there's another way to know that young people can actually add value to your business.
And that's great, because that aligns again with what we're saying, the 4 C's or the 6 C's, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, communication in schools, getting these kids ready for their disrupted future, all of that stuff. And I think that the messaging, it's so important that the messaging from the top, drives this agenda. And I mean, you've been in there, Tracy, and I haven't, but I guess I just think, more could be done to actually make these changes happen.
Yeah, you cannot dictate, though, to a society, because we're in a democracy. So you have to take people with you. So, you move it at the pace that your society can move.
Absolutely. I'm going to deviate a little bit and look at some of the questions on the side. We've got Sharon, my PA, to summarise them for me, because I can't listen and read at the same time. Don't have a very good corpus callosum. So what questions are coming through, Sharon?
Well, Craig Miller's asked, what is your party going to do about the appalling rate of teacher retention? Teachers are leaving the profession in large numbers after 2 to 5 years.
It's always been a trend that people come into teaching and don't necessarily stay for a long time. It's a lot of work. When you work out, you can get the same amount as a freezing worker.
It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but it's not all about pay. Now, there has been, obviously there's been over this term of government, there has been, the pay situation has been addressed to some extent. But what we've got, so I've been working in that area of learning support, and one of the big areas that has been a growth space in learning support is around behaviour. And so one of the other reasons why we saw an exodus of teachers out of the profession is an awful lot of work they were picking up on behalf of society in general, trying to help their students when all other social agencies were falling down. Through the collaboration with Oranga Tamariki and MSD, and that we've tried to actually pick up more of that away from teachers. With regard to behavioural, we've got the Managed Move pilot in Napier, which is a safe space there. I won't go into great detail, but there's also something being trialled in West Auckland. Modern learning environments. I think that was really interesting. The number of teachers that sensory overload affected teachers as much as it did some of our students in those early learning environments. So one size does not fit all. But I think we have to accept people don't stay in a job for 40 years. So we need to be constantly training teachers, constantly seeing that their teachers have enormous skills that they can take into other areas. Why shouldn't they? So I think, we need to accept that the profession itself is changing.
Yeah, some of that's going to happen. Some of it is just natural, isn't it, that people move on. But certainly if there's behaviour support in a more pleasant work environment, then that is going to help teacher retention. What's your thoughts on that, Nicola?
Nathan, three things. The first is training, because it's not only other teachers or school leaders that say to me, look, I'm a bit concerned that some of our teaching colleges, some of them aren't doing everything they need to do. It's also teachers themselves who say, well, I left without actually having been given a proper set of classroom management skills. I hadn't had the practical experience to make me confident when I first started teaching. And that was really undermining of my confidence. So we've got a bit of an emphasis in our education policy on lifting the standard of teacher training across the board. Many in education know that there is real variability at the moment. And part of that, what we'd like to see over time, is actually lifting the screening that goes on before people enter a pathway to train to be a teacher, because we do believe there's something special about teachers, and actually people working out earlier on that they may not have exactly what it takes is better for them, it's better for everyone. So training. Second thing is just in terms of that workload issue, which Tracy touched on. We recognise that we have to be really careful as a government, the Ministry of Education and anyone issuing dictates, okay, what's this going to do in terms of adding to the paperwork and admin and out of classroom time for teachers, because that's not really lifting achievement. So that's something we've got to be really clear about reducing, because it's creating a lot of stress. And third, support. The schools I see that do a beautiful job with beginner teachers are ones where they have really worked on their support systems in terms of their mentorship, the wraparound support, the monitoring, the away from classroom time being used in a constructive way. And we need to see that happening across all schools. So there's a role for the government to lead that.
Kia ora, Nicola. Naomi, what's your key things there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear Tracy talk about, the natural rotation versus actually the statistics that this is showing is that, teachers are leaving out of, dissatisfaction with what they were expecting when they went into the profession those first sort of 5 years. So that comes down to conditions. And I agree with the other two that it's about quality professional development, as we've talked about earlier. I think what we have to be careful of is, what seems to sometimes happen is that, politicians will throw money at a problem hoping that it lands in the right place. And in terms of this learning support coordination, the teachers have said that's a band-aid approach. You can't coordinate something that's not there. So we have to make sure that the knowledge and the professional development is there at the base first before it can all be coordinated. And talking about Aero, this ticking the boxes and all the admin that's going on with that's why we're saying move that away, get out of that and put it into quality professional development, where all of our policies are costed. So we can't just, think we're going to throw money at a problem. We've got to say where that money is going to come from. So that's why we're taking that approach.
So Nathan, can I ask a question? Is TOP going to do away with the learning support coordinators?
So we're not going to do away with the learning support coordinators, but what we are saying is that you can't coordinate something that's not there. So you need to put the funding in at the base level first before you go, now we're going to go and coordinate that, is what we're saying.
It sounds like you're all agreeing.
You need to go and talk to some people who've actually got learning support coordinators.
It sounds like you're in agreement, all of you, in terms of teacher retention seems to be about teacher support, making teachers feel supported. You might have different ways of going about doing that, but I'm hearing that.
Coordinators are for children's support, actually. So they're about coordinating the supports close to the ground as quickly as possible for children.
Yeah, which in turn supports the teachers, doesn't it? Because if they're not supported, then that's something else is loaded onto the teachers. Okay, what's another question? I think we've got time.
Owen's got a question. Can more work be put into rolling out emotional literacy education as opposed to waiting for students to tip up and require counselling?
That kind of ties in a little bit with what was going to be our last question around, our mental health focus. A key part of mental health is a connection to nature. And so we don't really want kids at desks, nose down, bum up, and not connecting to nature. So, yeah, I think you can tie those two together, Tracy, in your response.
The problem is we're asking schools to once again deal with what is something that is just deep inside our society. More of our families are under stress than have been for a very, very long time. And actually a whole lot of them are about to become under even more stress because of COVID. So while I absolutely agree with you that teaching children, even that simple thing, which is to pause, to take a breath, and then to, to self-moderate, that's really, really important for long-term success. But let's not make our schools, our ECEs, our teachers responsible. Let's make sure that we strengthen our communities and start dealing with the stresses that children have got inside their homes that are creating the issues that they come to school with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we traditionally thought about that emotional intelligence coming from parents, but we traditionally had a full-time at-home parent and usually a couple of full-time available grandparents. Yeah. So I think that might have happened quite naturally. Now, I think there are ways to do it within the education system. Not changing teachers all the time would be a way that you wouldn't have to add it as a curriculum unit, but it would naturally be built in. But, okay, what's your thoughts on that, Nicola, on this emotional intelligence of students?
Well, look, I'm on the Educational Workforce Select Committee. Well, I have been for this Parliament. And this is an issue actually that students brought to us in a petition saying we think mental health skills training should be available at every school. And so we sort of dived into that. And it's there actually in our curriculum at the moment, broadly, that students and young people should be taught about mental health and get some mental health skills. But schools are really haphazard in the way that they are doing that. So we have put in our education policy that we want a requirement explicitly that every school provide mental health skills training. And we anticipate that would involve a system of accredited courses and providers, accredited ways of doing that in the school environment. And that just recognises the fact that there's so much need out there. And schools are a place where students can learn this, and learning it as a peer group is really useful actually, because it means they can have a common language and a common way of discussing what's going on. We recognise that with that we need to give teachers more professional support and development in mental health because actually they're the ones that are being expected to do this. And on the broader point of wellbeing and nature, I personally am a huge believer that access to physical education, access to the outdoors, are two things that can really help. Now, I know it's dangerous territory because I'm not saying that anyone who's got a mental health challenge will be solved if they go for a walk outside. Of course, it's far more complex than that. But ensuring that young people have access to those opportunities and encouraging them to make the most of them, I think is something I'd like to see through all our early childhood services and schools.
Got it, Nicola. Naomi, emotional intelligence.
Yes, and looking at the evidence, it is very clear the benefits of outdoor free play in nature from a neuroscience perspective, from a healthcare perspective, from food science, education. Now even economics is talking about the benefits of children being in nature, connecting with themselves, each other, and their surrounding environment. It is so important, and it is something that we do advocate. There was a petition taken to Parliament, for example, from kindies, for outdoor kindies, that seems to have stalled somewhere in the system. So we are very much about that more holistic, see children as whole beings, enable them to make decisions, enable them to take risks and get creative and all of that good stuff that happens often when you're outside, less so in a classroom. Forest schools shouldn't be just for the privileged few who can afford to pay for them. We need to be bringing this stuff into our mainstream system, and that again comes down to quality professional development from our teachers and looking at it from a broad perspective, not just within our silos. Absolutely.
Okay, kia ora, Naomi. We've run out of time, so what I want to do is just sort of give you each 1 minute each to give any final thoughts. So Tracy, final thoughts from you?
There's a lot to do in this space. there's a lot to do because our world has changed and our children have changed and our families have changed. But one of the things that evidence says and that we know to be true is that if we can strengthen our families, if we can strengthen our communities, and if our children are loved and cared for and connected, then they will be more successful. Schools are part of that, ECE are part of that, but they cannot be left to carry the can that they had been previously. So I guess we're talking about, from our perspective, we're talking about much more holistic supports, both for family, community, and our education system. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Tracy. Nicola.
Well, while there's much to celebrate about our education system, and we must, we've got some incredible schools and teachers, I don't think we serve ourselves well if we say the status quo is fine. Clearly, there are still too many students who aren't succeeding in our schools and who aren't fulfilling their potential. So we have to be prepared to innovate, we have to be prepared to change, to do things differently, and to offer choices about the form that education takes. That's a core principle for the National Party. In particular, something I haven't highlighted in our session today that I think is really important is recognising that as many as 1 in 5 children and young people have some sort of additional learning need, whether that's dyslexia, dyspraxia, whether it's simply that they have high health needs in the form of diabetes, whether it's that they have another kind of special need, ADHD. We know this, and yet we don't resource it appropriately right now. We do have resourcing for children with high needs that follows the child. But what National is recognising in our education policy is that we need to provide schools with more resources to support those children with mild to moderate needs. We're proposing 6 million more hours for teacher aides, and we're also proposing flexible funding to go directly to schools specifically for use for children with additional needs, and whether they use that to get a clinical psychologist to do an assessment, whether they use that to do a module of professional development, or whether they use that to buy special learning resources. We think that catering to children with additional needs better, tailoring our support better, can make a real breakthrough difference across the education system. So I've taken my final minute to talk about that, and I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to have a kōrero about education, and while we do a lot of debating on the platform and election campaigns and the media highlight the disagreement, I do want to particularly acknowledge Naomi and Minister Martin, with whom I agree on some things.
Excellent. Kia ora for that, Nicola. Naomi.
Thanks, Nicola. And Tracy. And I guess what I want to say is that when I look to my children's future, I can look with hope or despair. And the Opportunities Party brings me the hope because of the fundamental changes that we are proposing and because of the strength and the quality of our policy, which is all up on our website for everyone to see. And we're not worried about people stealing it. You know, we want people to steal it because then we can go back to our day jobs. So for me, this is beyond politics. This is about the future of our nation. And we want to be there in between National and Labour, providing them with the vision to drive New Zealand forwards into a future that we all want for our children, our societies, our communities, our environment, and our economy. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Naomi. Okay, we're going to finish there. I just wanted to finish off by thanking all of you for having such an intelligent, meaningful conversation that I think, we're not arguing with each other. We're focusing on the similarities, may have different plans about how we do that, but just a huge mihi to all three of you for doing what you do, committing your life and times to, the betterment of children in New Zealand. May we all be on the same page.
And thank you, Nathan, for what you do and your leadership and providing us this opportunity.
Kia ora, Tracy, and kia ora, Naomi. And thanks everyone for watching. Ka kite.